Great to have you all with us. I do know that lunch was extended slightly, right? Because we were enjoying it a bit too much. I'm one of those too that indulge, but great to have you all back with us. Let's just hope that your sugar levels are maintained, right? But I promise you that you won't fall asleep in this session. In fact, we'll be enlightened and really gain some insight into understanding the environment, which is so critical to what it is that many of you here in the room do, and that is the implementation of green buildings in Africa. I thought I'd be funny and make a joke about cannabis being recently legalized in South Africa, only for personal consumption in your own private space, but in hopes that that might not be misinterpreted. But of course, we do know the benefits of hemp, the non-toxic elements of that particular natural plant when it comes to buildings and the likes. But trying to add things on a high note. That's a joke. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, to give us more details as to how best to implement green buildings, and of course in a sustainable manner, looking at a variety of options that are available, and bearing in mind that this is a conversation and a theme which is sponsored and supported by the ANIFC Edge, which proudly hosted training earlier on today. We will be gaining some insight into how best to establish this and implement it in our business cases. A reminder for those of you who might be keen on the international keynote and of course PropTech, feel free to alternate between the two rooms. But given that you're here today, we'll also be taking a look under this particular stream of the Development and Innovation Forum. In a moment, we'll also be taking a look at the shift in commercial spaces, moving more to the occupier demand, and of course understanding some sustainable and successful central business district redevelopments that have taken place recently. But to get back into the key conversation we'll have today, we will extend this session slightly, if necessary, by at least 5 to 10 minutes. Please warmly welcome on stage Lenore Cairncross of the Africa Green Building lead. She's from the IFC Edge, talking to us about the implementation of green buildings in Africa. Please warmly welcome her on stage.
Thanks, Gugu. And welcome everyone to the post-lunch session. It's always difficult when we're gathering together immediately after lunch to get everyone back in the room. So a little bit about our IFC Green Building Program. IFC is part of the World Bank Group. We are the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. And we created this program called EDGE, which is a certification program, as well as we have an EDGE app that you can use on your particular projects to see what the additional cost would be for going green and what your savings would be. And part of what I will be talking about is your return on investment, because I know many of us are investors in the room, and that's what we want to know about. If I'm going to pay more for me then on this building, then what will be the return? So just to give you a bit of an overview of what we focus on in our green building program, we have a 4-part strategy. The one part is working with financial institutions, and we work with them to support green financing through different kinds of facilities such as green bonds and green mortgages. We also work with the building sector, with developers, those in the construction industry, offering investment and advisory services. IFC does invest directly in property developers as well as through funds. And we have green building code initiatives. In Ghana, we've been working on the green building code, and there's also a potential to work together in Nigeria as well, and we are looking at collaborations around that with GIZ. And in other parts of the world, we've done quite a bit of work on the ground with that. And finally, we have our EDGE certification, which is a software as well as an actual certification program. So in terms of investments, IFC has invested more than 4.5 billion in green buildings. Climate is one of IFC's priority areas, and we have a target to invest 28% of all of our investments in climate-related projects by 2020, and by 2030, 35%. So climate is definitely seen as one of the key areas for us to focus on. And by region, somehow this didn't come out on that slide, we've invested about 419 million in the sub-Saharan Africa region. So in terms of the ROI research, we did some research across different building types to look at what is this return on investment. If we need to pay slightly more for a green building, then how quickly will I recover that investment through savings in water efficiency and energy efficiency? And the green building standard that we have, I'll just go forward one. Just an overview of EDGE. It takes into account just three particular areas. It's water, energy, and energy embodied in the building materials. And in order to achieve the standard, we use a baseline of whatever the building code is within the country. So if you're operating in South Africa, it will be operating off the baseline of the SANS 10400. If you're operating in other countries, whatever the baseline code is within that country. And the EDGE standard has also been localized to local climatic conditions. So you need to be 20% more efficient in water, 20% more efficient in energy, and 20% more efficient in terms of embodied energy within the materials. So if you have a project, you can run it through our freely available EDGE app and check if your project meets the standard. If you haven't already been to our store, you can come and we can quickly run your project through it. It takes about 15-20 minutes, and our software is freely available. So our aim is to make green buildings as accessible as possible for everyone. And the EDGE standard was specifically developed for developing countries. In fact, it's not available in developed countries, and some of them have asked, can they make it available for the developed countries? So what you will receive is a third-party certificate. In South Africa, our certifier is Green Building Council South Africa. They certify on the residential sector, and then on the commercial and across Africa, we have SGS ThinkStep, as well as GBCI as our global certifiers. So in terms of the ROI research, we looked at the energy, water, and materials categories, and we focused on different countries across Africa. We also looked at different sectors. We looked at homes, hotels, shopping centers, offices, schools, and hospitals, and also some light industry. What we looked at is what measures could we put in place that would help us to more easily achieve the standard, and what would be the easiest to reach the EDGE Green Building Standard. So a number of different assumptions were made, and we're collecting additional data for this. So what did we see in South Africa? In terms of homes, we found that if you had an incremental cost of about 570 Rand, you could achieve about 90 Rand per month saving, and the payback period was about basically half a year, 6 months. For offices, for example, the additional incremental cost would be about 200,000 Rand, and the monthly savings would be about 14,000 Rand, and you'd recover that within about 1.2 years. So if we go into a specific example, and this is a case study in South Africa, which is the case of homes, the one I mentioned. So if we look at, say, 80 square meter home, 2-bedroom home, and around 50 units, the energy measures that were used were reflective paint for external walls, efficient air conditioning systems, energy-saving light bulbs, and also savings from, on the water side, we had 21% savings through low-flow shower heads and dual-flush toilets. So if you look at those kinds of measures, they're quite simple measures. They're easily accessible to developers, and they're not too far from where they're currently designing. What we found working with some developers in South Africa is that many of them were already designing for our standard, and they didn't have to do too much more in order to be able to be certified. So that incremental cost on like one project was about 0.5% of the total cost of the home. And then material savings, they used composite in situ concrete and steel. And you'll see there in terms of the project metrics, there's also the operational CO2 savings in tons of CO2 per year. So more and more companies are now being asked to report on their carbon and what sort of their carbon footprint. So the Edge software can help you to be able to report on that. So in Club Village, which is a real project, they achieved 25% savings through reduced window-to-wall ratio, natural ventilation, energy-efficient heat pumps, energy savings through the lighting systems, and energy controls for the common areas. On the water side, basically low-flow plumbing fixtures and also dual-flush toilets. On the material side, they use solid, dense concrete blocks for internal and external walls. So the key takeaways for us was that the most cost-effective innovations in homes across Africa were in lighting, energy, low E-coated glass, and water conservation, with the payback period of around 6 months. And you'll see we looked at Angola, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria. And in some areas like Nigeria, the additional incremental cost was about $20 per unit. And the payback was in 0.3 years. So that's probably 2 or 3 months. And the utility savings was $10 per unit per month. So you can see, if you're looking at affordable housing, how this might be applicable, because the additional cost is not that much more, and in the long term, you're going to be saving in terms of operation. And you'll see there some of the measures that were put in place, very similar to what was applied in the South Africa case study. For hotels, we found that the most cost-effective interventions were in cooling and in lighting and in water, with a typical payback period also around 6 months. There, for energy, it was using heat pumps for hot water, energy-saving light bulbs, occupancy sensors in the bathrooms, and in some climates, natural ventilation for the corridors. It depends on how the humidity in some climates, whether that may be possible. On material side, the floor slabs were the biggest efficiency driver, ranging between 35 to 60% of the material cost, but out of a total of 7 interventions. And for water, it was similarly using efficient water closets, low-flow shower heads, aerators, and auto shadow faucets, and this was supplemented by grey water systems and recycling. And I think our recent experience in Cape Town with severe drought and water restrictions is that more and more we're looking at using grey water recycling, also water collection, and other water measures in order to save water and recycle water as much as possible. And Africa being a drought or at least a water scarce region, saving water, I think, will become more and more of a priority for developers and those in the construction industry. For shopping centers, the most cost-effective interventions were around also lighting and cooling, energy consumption, with a typical payback a little bit more at 9 months. And you'll see there, in Angola, the incremental cost was additional $43,000 and the payback period in 0.1 years, with about $30,000 saving per month. And similarly, I think South Africa seemed to be the most expensive one there, with an additional close to 4 million rand investment and a payback period of 2.3 years. So in terms of hospitals, we had our first hospital certified in Ghana at the beginning of this year. And that is the Comfort Anonke Hospital in Ghana. And there they had 56% savings through reduced water-to-wall ratio, insulation of the roof and external walls, low E-coated glass, air conditioning with an air-cooled chiller, and they also had energy savings in the lighting systems for internal and external spaces. They use solar hot water collectors, and solar PV. On the water side, they also use low-flow faucets in the bathrooms and dual-flush water closets. For the materials, they used aluminum sheets on steel rafters for the roof construction, 3D wire panels for the external and internal walls, and ceramic tile flooring. So as you can see, it's not very different from what otherwise would be constructed, and they were able to achieve the EDGE standard very, very well. And you'll see there for the different countries what the incremental cost. I think the highest one is for Nigeria at $55,000 incremental cost, with a saving of around $3,800 per month and a 1.2 year payback period. For offices, the most effective interventions that was found through the research are in the areas also of lighting and cooling, with a typical payback period of less than a year. And there, the most efficient was found to be in Ghana, with an additional incremental cost of about $41,000 and utility savings of $5,600. And in the office areas, the occupancy sensors, insulation in the roof, reflective paint, and variable refrigerant flow cooling systems. This helped on the energy side to achieve the energy savings. For materials, floor slabs were the biggest energy efficiency drivers. Between 30 and 46% of the material costs out of a total of 7 interventions. And for water, the cost-effective interventions were dual-flush water closets in the bathrooms, and also water-efficient urinals and faucets, and low-flow faucets. So that is in our overall view on the ROI, and as you can see, we're still continuing to collect the data. Our program has been running, we were launched in South Africa in 2015, we launched in Ghana last year, 2017, and earlier this year we launched in Nigeria. So we are still growing the program across Africa, but we believe that our tool can help developers and the construction industry to go in a green direction, and having a tool that has been localized can help us to make that possible. I don't know if there are any questions. Anyone would like to ask?
Hello, my name is Joseph, Brawl Ghana Limited. To what extent is IFC involved in promoting and sponsoring solar-powered buildings? We have sun throughout the year, sunshine throughout the year, and companies find it difficult installing solar panels to power their buildings. So I need to know, to what extent is IFC involved in all this?
We have different teams who are involved on solar. We also have different projects. We have some off-grid lighting projects that are using solar. We have a Lighting Africa program that IFC is invested in, which is specifically around lighting. But also our standard also takes into account the solar PV, and it's something that we do actively promote with our developers as well.
And also to answer your question, we have some facilities with some banks. And I know you're from Ghana, so I use the Ghana case, where we have a bank that we're working with, and they would be in the position to be able to fund such yes. So it's really not the case that it's always going to be directly from IFC. Sometimes we would be working through financial institutions to do this. And then also, if you look at the Edge app, you realize that solar is also one of the options. Mm-hmm. The Edge app is not supposed to tell developers how they should develop, or how the architect should design. It's only providing you with options that you can take to ensure that your project is green.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you.